Welcome to Radical AI, a podcast about technology, power, society, and what it means to be human in the age of information. We are your hosts, Dylan and Jess. And in this episode, we interview Moses Namara of Black in AI about the new Black in AI academic program, a program that serves as a resource to support Black junior researchers as they apply to graduate programs, navigate graduate school, and enter the postgraduate job market.
Before we share this interview with Moses and talk about some of the amazing work that Black in AI is doing, including this academic program and their mentorship program, we did want to take a few minutes to address the disheartening news that happened in the AI ethics community this past week. So if you've been in AI Twitter or really have been reading the New York Times or the Washington Post this past week, you've probably heard and seen that the co-founder of Black in AI, Timnit Gebru, was wrongfully fired from Google's ethical AI team. And this series of events has huge potential impacts on the tech community at large. And it's clear that how we act now, and we not just being the tech industry, but all of us who are interacting with this news, it's clear that how we act now shapes the future that we're hoping to build within this greater community. And so let's talk about it.
Even though the news is still unfolding and there's a lot of new information coming out every single day on Twitter, the New York Times, and many other places, here's our take on the events as they transpired as of Monday, December 7th, 2020, and also why they matter. And keep in mind that the specifics might change after this episode is released, so this is just what we know as of right now. So a little while back, Timnit co-authored a paper with some other colleagues that highlighted and expressed some concerns about the future of AI models, especially natural language models that are going to need really large data sets to run. And some of these concerns included bias with the models and also environmental impact of needing a lot of hardware to run them. So they submitted this paper for internal review at Google, as is the process with most large tech companies that have research teams. And 5 weeks after the piece had already been internally reviewed and approved for publication within Google through their own standard processes, the Google leadership team actually made the decision to instead tell Timnit that she needed to redact it, which everyone is stating is a form of censorship because they did this without warning or cause. So Timnit asked them to explain this decision and to take accountability for it, and especially accountability for their poor stances on discriminatory and harassing workplace conditions in the first place. So how Timnit did this was she sent an email to the leadership team asking for three things. She first asked for transparency around who was involved in calling for the redaction of the paper. And then she asked if the leadership team could have a series of meetings with the ethical AI team. And she finally asked for a better understanding about what was considered acceptable research at Google so that she could know this for the future. And she told them if they weren't able to meet these demands, then she would work on an end date with Google after she got back from her vacation that she was about to leave on.
And just an important point here, when we're talking about redaction, we're really talking about a full retraction of the paper from any sort of publication. So not individual word censorship, but saying that the paper cannot be published based on internal review. And Timnit, at least at the beginning, was not given any cause whatsoever for why that retraction was requested.
And this was after she had already submitted it to the conference at this point for the conference's own review processes. So additionally, with this, along with this email to the leadership team, Timnit also sent an email internally to what is called the Brain and Women's Ally Listserv, which is a space at Google to foster an inclusive work environment for women in the Google Brain organization. So in this email to that listserv, Timnit shared her experiences of discrimination and her frustration regarding the inaction of the Google leadership team and the organization around diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So in this email, she also shared her experience regarding some of the processes of submitting and gaining approval and then being forced to retract this paper. And of course, this email found its way to the leadership team. So they then reached out to Timney and they told her first that they weren't going to meet her demands, or I guess her requests from the earlier email. And because of the email that they saw that she sent to the Brandon Women Allies listserv, they thought that she hadn't acted like a model Google manager. And so instead of working with her about her requests or working with her on a possible end date, they told her that they were actually going to, quote, accept her resignation immediately, which basically means that they used legalese to fire her and then tried to make it sound like she had been the one to make that choice. So after this, her Corp account was cut off. She no longer had access to any of the emails that she sent, and even her immediate manager was not informed of the decision made by the leadership team. And so in light of all of this news and the news that's continuing to come out, we wanted to share that we stand with the AI ethics community in believing that Timney was wrongfully fired from her job at Google. And we think that these acts are symbolic of a much larger problem with racism and discrimination in the tech workplace.
So obviously, we've had Tim Neat on the show before, so we're not unbiased in this. And we understand that Google, and especially Google management, they do have their own side to this. And you're welcome to go follow, Jeff Dean on Twitter or whatever to see this other side. We are, after hearing all the sides, we're still pretty strongly in Tim Neat's corner here. And even without the particulars, right? The particulars are like depressing, disheartening, heartbreaking to a certain degree, even like in a vacuum, right? Like strategically, it doesn't make sense for Google to have done this. It doesn't it's obviously unethical, the process that they went through here. But what has really struck us as we've been reflecting on this has been that symbolic element to it. The fact that this is not an isolated incident, that this is happening after Google has time and time again paraded around Team Need as the Black woman who's at the top of their AI ethics work, and they're working towards diversity and they're working towards inclusion. And then this is what they do behind the scenes, right? And this is not something that has happened to just one Black woman at one massive tech company right now, based on what we've heard, right, in Radical AI as we've done these interviews, is that this is something that has happened time and time again. And if this is what's happening to the top, to what the company even says is their top AI ethics researcher who is a Black woman, you can just imagine all the different stories of Black women who are just getting into the industry of ways that they've been silenced or fired, or in this case, quote unquote, asked for their resignation within all of this legalese. And this is a systemic issue here. And I think that's for us, and just, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's why this is such an important issue for us to talk about and speak up about, because this is not just a flash in the pan. This is the pan, right? This is not a bug. This is the feature of the system.
And in terms of this being symbolic of a much larger issue in not only the tech industry, but honestly the workplace at large in the world, and has been for a very, very long time, there's just some major problems with the way that diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are conducted at some of these large companies. And something that I've seen circling around a lot in the Twitter community, I guess, since this incident, was that a lot of people are hired in these companies for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and then they're paraded around like these token trophies, and they're told that they're doing amazing things at these companies, and they're in all the photos, and they're in all of the panels, and of course they're asked to do a ton of service work to try to raise diversity inclusion efforts at these companies, which is a whole other problem. But then the second that they actually do the thing that they were hired to do, which in this case for Timney was to point out problems with bias and ethics and concerns with machine learning and AI algorithms, the second that they do what they were hired to do, then if it's not in compliance with the company's overall PR mission, they're immediately hushed and I guess in the worst place, even fired and hugely discriminated against. So it's definitely speaking to a much larger issue that's happening in general in the tech field, but then just in the workplace.
Yeah, and this is a systemic issue. This is an economic issue. But, this gets to the heart of why it's so impossible for people to make change, because in these massive systems, and I don't know, Jeff or any of the other managers to be able to say, these are bad people or people acting in bad faith, right? But even if we say that these are good people acting in good faith, right? The way that this has happened shows a blatant disrespect to Timnit and to her team, right, at Google, who are doing the jobs that Google has ostensibly hired them to do. Which means that for all that Google is talking about, these checklists of ethics, or all they're talking about with these visions of diversity inclusion, when the rubber meets the road and they have people who are working, 90-hour weeks to make this happen, they don't actually want it. Right? So it's one thing to be able to speak the jargon. It's another thing to actually be able to give resources, which to their credit they were doing. But then through this, all of that goodwill that they've built up through this team that, Timnit has had to build over so many years and jump through so many hoops in order to have the amazing team that she does have, or did have, like the fact that this is the way that part of that ends, or at least her journey at Google after all of that work ends, is just, for me, it's just blatantly disrespectful at best, right? And discriminatory at worst.
Of course, all of this is to say that things right now are looking a little bit bleak. And we at Radical AI, and also just as a part of the AI ethics community, are hoping to help support efforts that are looking to make things better, which is actually why we thought this week the episode and the interview with Moses would be the perfect beacon of light, or maybe silver lining with what's happening, to let everyone know that there are really great opportunities for people who are feeling a little bit down and hopeless right now. And we completely understand everyone who's feeling that way. And we're here to support you and to stand in solidarity with you. But for those who are looking to maybe be a little bit uplifted and looking for opportunities that are really, we think, making amazing efforts to help with diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in a real sense, not just in a PR sense, then we are just so thrilled to talk about some of the amazing programs that Black in AI as an organization has implemented to really help with some of these awful issues of racism and discrimination in the tech and in the AI field as a whole. And one final note before we jump into the interview, we just wanted to thank everyone in this community for being incredibly supportive and for speaking out. And if you are looking to get involved or to help support Timnit through what is happening, we have provided some resources, including an open letter that you can sign in the show notes. So we encourage you to go look at those after you have finished listening to our interview with Moses Namara of Black in AI. And Moses Namara is a Facebook Research Fellow and PhD candidate in human-centered computing at Clemson University. He uses interdisciplinary research methods from computer science, psychology, and the social sciences to understand the principles behind users' adoption and use of technology, decision-making, and privacy attitudes and behaviors. His research interests are in the field of usable privacy and security and human-computer interaction. We hope you enjoy this interview.
We are here on the line today with Moses. Moses, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we're here to talk specifically about the Black in AI academic program. And for people who haven't heard about it at all, can you just give us the 101 about what it is?
Yeah, the Black in AI academic program is a part of the Black in AI group that focuses on the academic aspects of Black students, especially within the field of AI, but it also extends to computer science and STEM in general, for those who are interested. We start from offering what we call the Graduate Application Mentorship Program. This is a program that basically guides prospective graduate students through the application process. The key thing here being that we basically link them with mentors, who are in this case either PhD students or faculty members, who can then give them one-on-one advice in terms of how to go about the application and demystify the whole process. Further along that line is we have a new program in the pipeline, which then focuses on, once they become students, up to the postgrad level, making sure that there's a community that support them through that process. There are people that they can interact with and seek advice, and also demystify the faculty application process, which becomes the next step after that. Not only faculty, but also industry at some point.
So, can you unpack a little bit of the inner workings of this academic program? And for students who are interested in being a part of it, what can they expect to get out of it? And how can they hope to apply or join it?
So I'll start with the inner workings of the program. So what we basically do for each academic year, right now we are in the 2020 to 2021 application process. We have cohorts for each of those years. What we do is we send out interest solicitations to our members. So people have to be a part of the group. They join separately. That is a separate process. Joining the Black in AI group. And so what we do is then we send out solicitations for people who are interested in the process. Typically we try to do it around August, September, around there. We're still trying to get our timing right. And then once they show interest, what we then do is have them send in their resumes, send in their interests, like the fields they want to study. We also have them take us through how prepared they are. Have they done the JRE? Do they already know some schools they've already checked out? Which countries are they thinking about applying to? Just to basically get a general sense of their interests, their academic background or research background. And once we get that in, we then at the same time reach out to mentors, right? So mentors are PhD students or faculty who are interested in being matched up with these students. We basically also do the same, the school that you are in, the topic or the field that you're studying or that you're teaching, and if you have the time and the capacity to actually take on students for mentorship, around around two to three students on average. And then when we get those in, we basically then kind of do the matching. Right now we do it, it's a human who does it. It's a team who sit down and go through these applications and try to see who would be the best mentor. Once that is done, we then send out emails notifying the students that, hey, this is your mentor, you should reach in touch. We do the same for the mentor side. Now, above and beyond that, we have what they call information sessions, which is basically now an open call for people who can join in the information session. So it's basically a session where anybody can join in, but most especially those students who are interested in applying for grad school, and kind of come together within a general information session and get acquainted with the process. From we usually select speakers, so faculty members who actually review these applications, or PhD students who have recently gone through the process, and so they share information through that information session along. So the information sessions are arranged depending on the stages with which students are at. So initially it's, how do I write a personal statement, or how do I identify which school, or those types of questions. But and then the next information session would look at making sure you're meeting the deadlines and stuff like that.
Could you tell us a little bit about how and why this initiative started?
The reason it started is me and Radiate, I got to know Radiate. We won a Facebook Emerging Scholar award, and that kind of, brought us as acquaintances. But it stemmed from this theory that the pipeline is broken, whereby there are few Black students who end up coming into grad school, and as a result, there is nobody to hire because the pipeline is broken. And so another thing that also motivated us is that, for example, last year we only had about 20 Black students across the US graduate with PhDs. That is a very minuscule number compared to other people. And so we then, me and her came and sat together based on our own experiences, thinking, okay, how did we end up in the grad school system, and what was difficult joining that? And what we found is that when we shared similar experiences, whereby when we were planning to actually join grad school, we had people who had either done grad school, who kind of torched the path or held our hand along the way. We didn't do it just mystically. It wasn't just a one day thing that popped out of nowhere. It was actually seeing someone who has done it or who has gone through the process and giving you that motivation to actually take you through the process, making sure that you know how to write a personal statement or a research statement, whatever the case is. And so we then decided to come together and make it, kind of try to scale that and make it a formal program in which people like us could go through that process.
And you mentioned that you and Reddy both explained that, or you talked about how the pipeline is broken. I'm curious if you can maybe explore that a little bit and explain in what ways is it broken, and in what ways did you experience that brokenness?
It's when people say that the pipeline is broken, what it basically means is that there aren't enough Black people to hire, or who have the essential skills to be hired for a role or a job. And therefore, even if we wanted to hire people, we actually don't have anybody to hire, right? And so then what that brought us to thinking is that, okay, how do we demystify this or address the issue of the pipeline being broken? How do we increase opportunities for others and bring them into the AI field, especially as a new field that is emerging with societal repercussions if we don't think about other groups who may not necessarily be involved in the development process of these systems, right? And so one way what we found is that most people usually have graduate degrees, and yet there are few Black people who actually end up applying for grad school, even if they have done undergrad, right? And so the reason came then, how do we address that issue, or how do we increase that higher turnout of students finally, applying and getting into grad school?
And you mentioned your own story also kind of compelled you to do this work. Would you mind sharing some of that story and why this work is so important to you?
Yeah, the work is important to me because one is to increase opportunity for others who look like me and not be the only one doing X, or not being the first one who does X. And so it's that desire to kind of reflect and pass on pass on the baton, so that's one motivation. But the other is also I remember when I was trying to apply for grad school, and I went to a graduate director, and I faced the questions that I was asked were discouraging. It wasn't from a position of encouraging me to actually go make, saying, you're made out for this role, and maybe if you actually do apply, you can make it to the process. It was from the perspective that I had succeeded by me reaching graduate there, also passing the undergrad level. I had superseded what most Black people could have done, and so I should be satisfied with that achievement, and therefore that was enough in terms of my own aspirations, and so I could go off and do other things. And so it got me thinking that maybe it's not only me who faces these kinds of roadblocks along the way. And so it was also hard getting the right information in terms of, should I do a master? Should I do a PhD? Should I stay in the same undergraduate institution? Should I change to another, academic institution? What are the advantages and disadvantages? There wasn't an organized avenue through which I could get some of these questions answered. And so it felt like a lonely process that I felt like if it was a group of us and we're going through, it would have been much better. So that's one. The other is also just the financial hurdles in terms of issues such as GRE. The GRE is expensive, and most schools require GRE, and so most people end up spending a lot of money trying to do it over and over again just to make sure they have the right grades. And or others end up being discouraged just because they don't have the financial capability to do that. So trying to, if you want to address some of these systematic hurdles, you're better doing it as a group than an individual. And so that's why we come together, organized under the Black in AI academic program, to try and shed more light on some of these barriers, but also find or advocate for change in terms of how these academic admissions are done.
And you mentioned the mentorship program multiple times now, which is related to but different than the academic program. And I'm curious, Moses, in your experience in this post-grad world, do you have a specific story or memory of a time when you either were mentored by someone or you mentored someone yourself where it made a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, I'll start with having been mentored. So when I was at undergrad, I don't know what pushed me, but I joined the research. There was a research lab, and I went to the University of Maryland, and there was a professor called Dr. Michelle Misruth, and so I think I got to know that I was going to take her class in the next semester. And then when I checked her out on the website, it said, "Hey, I'm looking for students, if you're interested in research opportunities." I never knew what research was. So I decided to go to her and say, "Hey, it looks like you're looking for students. I would be happy to, work on some research and figure out what that is." And so for me, that's kind of what opened my my eyes to grad school, because after that it's like, okay, what next? What comes after this? How can, I've enjoyed doing this formal research, how do I continue if I wanted to kind of become an expert at it? And so she acted as my mentor, as someone who could guide me, but also having supportive parents who knew what having gone to school and done grad school themselves, just having them as people who say you can do it, you actually have the capability to do it. So for me, that's my unique situation. In terms of mentoring others, of course, I'm now a fourth year student, PhD student, about at the beginning of the end. But through the process, once I joined, I've had people reach out multiple times to me just to have one-on-one chats to tell them how my experience, my grad school experience. I have referenced them to people who are better fits if I find I can't maybe answer some of their questions. Just to have those connections of people you can connect them to, or even having telling them about your own experience and if there are opportunities where you are. For me, that's one way I've mentored others to join grad school.
Could you talk to us a little bit about your own research? Like what are you working on right now?
That's a good question. I work on online privacy issues to deal with online privacy, specifically looking at how do we make the privacy decision making process better or easier for people. But also as technology increasingly becomes more prevalent, and most of the technologies that people get to adopt are really huge holes for personal user data, how do privacy concerns then factor in terms of what people decide is appropriate to use and not to use? So I look at technology adoption and how privacy affects that. And basically with the goal of one, understanding the motivation behind, but also addressing finding solutions to how you improve that process and ensure that people's privacy is protected.
So going back to your story a little bit then, what got you interested in going into this field and in HCI in general?
Yeah, so yeah, it was from that research experience that I had at undergraduate, to be honest, because that's the type of work she was doing and the professor was doing and the lab was doing, and to me it seemed cool at the time. And as with anything else, you at that point in time, what I was trying, I didn't know what I wanted to be or wanted to focus on, and so it was basically try and error, trying to find your own interests. What do you enjoy? What do I find satisfying enough to wake up in the morning and continuously be able to enjoy doing it? And so through that experience, it kind of landed me in this area that I'm currently doing.
A few months ago, when we interviewed one of the founders of Black and AI, Dr. Timnit Gebru, she talked a lot about international perspectives in both in terms of privacy, but also just in general, and how, when she went to NeurIPS for the first time, she was one of maybe like 18 Black scholars there, and how that community's grown. And I'm curious from your perspective in this international space, maybe specifically about the academic program. Have you seen folks from across the world become part of the academic programs and the mentorship programs in addition to the U.S.?
Yeah. Actually, the highest majority of our applicants are from international applicants. Majority from Africa, and so what we then realized is, okay, I think we should strike a balance between people who are from here originally and also people from from the international partner international countries. So we have seen a high number of applicants internationally, and they're not only applying to come to the US, but to go to Europe, to go to universities within Africa, universities in Asia. Of course, the high number being Europe and Canada, but we see that we see interest from and especially within these countries, especially from Africa, we see a lot of students who have found this program useful, because ideally then they wouldn't get to talk to people who actually end up making some of these decisions. Just doing that mentorship, one-on-one matching, having someone talk to you about how to structure your research statement or which programs are a good fit for you. Just that information alone is usually enlightening. But it's also equally beneficial for the mentors to learn how to mentor people who are not like them, learn the academic systems of other countries, so that you can make a good informed decision in terms of if you get an applicant from maybe Nigeria and you're not familiar with how the university system works over there. Through this program, having interacted with people from there before, you kind of already have an idea, or you start to develop an idea or a good sense of applicants in that area. So I feel like it's a win-win for all of us, and with the recent movements that have happened over the summer, we've seen a lot of universities now take it up. University departments take it up upon themselves to actually have these kinds of programs where they try to, mentor people or mentor potential prospective applicants.
Yeah, I'm just still struck by that number that you gave towards the beginning of this interview, where last year there were 20 Black PhD students who graduated. And that just, to me, just like there's something deeply sick about that system where that's the case, where the number and the ratio is just like so off. And for folks besides, I guess, outside of this mentorship program and this the academic program at Black and AI, like what can we do about that? What do we do as like almost systemically to address some of those issues?
Yeah. So yeah, it was 20. It's 20. We counted them, 20 Black students, and then more surprising is all over the US you have 85 Black faculty in CS or computer engineering departments. So how do we do that? First of all, that already shows you that that's something that needs to be addressed. One is to be intentional about it. Well, I think historically we've been, let the chips fall where they fall. Whoever is the best student will finally end up finding their way. But what we forget is that people like us face different, have different barriers as compared to people who might be different. And so if you as a faculty member, you are a director of a lab at a university, an R1 university, for example, and since you started your faculty journey, you've never had anybody who's different from you, or you've never mentored someone, or you never supervised someone who's different from you. This is your opportunity to actually be intentional about it and say, hey, I'm looking for the best Black student from X. How can I find that student? Black in AI, if you reach out to us, we're happy to make those connections, because we really have a very good students with good experience, good research experience, and just people who are looking for the opportunity to apply their skills. So one, I think, is intentionality, being intentional about it and knowing it's not going to happen by chance. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, then you have to look out. Two is to create opportunities where they're not. So even if you don't have a position in your lab, how can you make that connection? So if I reached out to you, would you be able to connect me to someone who might be able to help me? Being able to you may not necessarily be in a position to help, but you might be in the position to actually make a connection that might turn out to be fruitful later. I think those are some of the quick things that come to mind in terms of how people can actually help.
Do you think that this is a solution space that exists mostly in higher education and within academia in universities, or do you think that this is something where there might also be some solutions in I guess like K through 12 education and just outside of the academic bubble in general?
I don't think it exists outside of the academic bubble. I think it's because all of our one, it's not only at the higher level. It has to begin down to the kindergarten level, K through 12 level, because that's a whole pipeline, as people like to put it. One thing that I like to think about is you start, if you want to help, it has to start at that level when someone is young. You can only help someone when they're still in a position to be helped, right? And usually the most impactful years are actually those K through 12 years, because that's when we are absorbing information, we are growing, we are still looking out for opportunities, and so making sure that barriers along the way are kind of addressed, and people have the flexibility to actually successfully maneuver through those processes, because you cannot get to graduate level without doing undergrad, right? You cannot get to undergrad without doing high school, or you cannot do high school without middle school, and so on and so on. And so it has to start at that level for it to eventually come out at the top. Yeah, so for an example, at that level, I think things like after school programs are really critical, because parents are working 2-3 jobs. They may not necessarily be there to supervise people's the children's homeworks and stuff like that. So those after school programs would be important in terms of trying to keep children out of trouble, but also kind of at the same time supplementing them with additional skills that they can use to improve on their skills. So it's something that really has to start from a young stage, really.
sometimes in at least activist spaces that I've been in, there's kind of like two ways to think about changing a system. One, you either work within it, or two, you get rid of it and try to start over. And it definitely seems like in this space, there's much more of we have a system, it's broken, we're going to try to change it and acknowledge that it's broken, but do the work to change it, and not so much that we need to throw the entire thing out. And I'm wondering if you just have thoughts about that dichotomy.
That's a hard one. Yeah, this is a system that has been there for a long time, so it will be very difficult to just throw the whole of it out and start afresh. But what we can do, as you listed, is try to now recognize what are the implicit biases that exist, and what are the implicit barriers that and unintentionally or intentionally have put in place that we can do away without, and try to increase opportunity for people. An example is the GRE. Is the GRE really important? That's something still debatable. Does it dictate how someone who is going to be a successful or unsuccessful graduate candidate? That's still debatable. But when you look at it, it is something that actually stops a majority of students from applying. That is, our research has shown that most people, once they look through the website and see what are the requirements, okay, you need a transcript, you need a GRE, you need a personal statement. Okay, what's a GRE? Oh, it's some test that you must, standardized test that you must take for you to be able then to be one of the requirements, fulfill one of the requirements. Oh, how much is it? Oh, $200 per test. Where am I going to get $200? I'm a break student, right? At home, I don't have anybody within my community or my support system that can be able to give me that money. So there and then someone's ambitions stop just because they couldn't afford the $200. So some schools do waivers, some don't. And so we then have to ask ourselves, is this something that we want to continuously do with or do away with? And so that's how you change the system, I think, from the inside, and just removing some of those barriers or extra hoops that were put in place to keep people out.
So I'm wondering if you can provide some advice here for both sides of the spectrum. So on the one side, I'm wondering if you have advice for students at any level of education who are looking for mentorship in this space, outside of course, the programs that we outlined from Black and AI today. And then on the other side, I'm wondering if you have advice for people who have the capacity to mentor and what you would tell them.
Yeah, I'll start with the students, I think. One is that it's challenging. It's going to be it's a challenging process or journey, if you want to call it that. Academics are boring. Someone famously told me, and that's why if they were easy, everyone would be doing them, right? Everyone would be doing academics. So it's a tough journey, and you have to persevere. And so the question becomes, how do you persevere? One is through seeking out people who have done it and learning from the experience, to give you that moral boost that you can actually make it. For those who have stuck through the process, they have finally made it, and that should give you the courage that you will also make it. For those that have failed and have given up, they haven't been as especially in terms of the academic in terms of the academic journey, they haven't been as successful, right? And so you want to be that person who seeks for help when you need it, and not be afraid to. There's a lot of what I find imposter syndrome, especially within the STEM field. The fear of being blown out of the water as a fraud, or the fear of being seen as someone who doesn't know, who's not an expert. I think we have to get over that imposter syndrome and know that each one and every one of us has to start from somewhere. And the way you do it is, one is by reaching out to people who know more than you do, and two is just to also work on your own perseverance if you need to. For the mentorship side, is be conjugant of the backgrounds of the people you're mentoring. First of all, be interested in mentoring. Don't just do it because it's fashionable. If you're doing it because it's the fashionable thing, please don't, because you'll make it worse for the mentee. And so second is to be interested and try to empathize with the person you're mentoring. They may not be as professional as you'd want them to be. They may not be as eloquent as you're used to. Try to see how you can help to the best of your abilities. And one is to first of all know their background, know where they're coming from. What do they like? What don't they like? What challenges are they facing? Do they have an stable internet connection, which would make video calls possible or not? Understand their situation. Sometimes they can do video calls, sometimes they can't. Maybe a text will suffice or an email will suffice. Like, what is the best communication strategy that you can have with them? And then, how do you offer feedback, or how do you actually mentor? Some people may not need a lot of heavy lifting. Some people might do, and if you have the capacity to do the heavy lifting, then you do it. If you don't, don't feel ashamed to say that I can't do it. There's no harm in saying, hey, at any other time I would have helped you, but I'm, right now I'm swamped and I can't be able to take on another student or another mentee. I have a lot of things that I'm dealing with. But, there's someone X. There's just that I know maybe we can talk to her and see if she has the capacity to take you on. Something like that.
And then I'm thinking of folks who write into our show and say, hey, we're white. We are, like, we as the listener, we're white. We're well-intentioned. We want to do something in this space. We don't really know what our place is in this. For those folks who make up the majority and have a level of privilege in these academic spaces, do you have any particular pieces of advice maybe for them to be able to make room?
Yeah. One is to understand that you're privileged, right? Not everybody has the opportunities that you have. And so recognizing that, I think, is first of all usually the most important thing to understand. And so then once you recognize, or you're coming from a position of privilege, how do you come off, in terms of your seeking out for if you're reaching out to help people, you want to do it in a way that you don't belittle them, I would say. You want to do it from a good place, and people are always receptive to that. If you come in as someone who's imposing, saying, hey, I think you should do X and Y because that's the way it has always been done, and you don't know, and I know more than you, then people are not going to take it in a good way. I think for me, in my own experience, what I've seen from people who are privileged is the language that they use. To them, they can speak because maybe they're speaking from their own experience, but then when they speak, because for you also have your own experience, some of the speech may not really align or may not come off in terms of the way they intended or something like that. So I think one is just to be cautious in terms of how you communicate or how you reach out to people, and how you want to help them once you've actually are you going to be able to stand up for them once you bring them on board? Are you willing to help address some of the challenges or clear some of the challenges that they face once you bring them on board, or are you just going to bring them on board and then leave them to figure out their own way? Maybe that may not suffice, depending on the situation. But just do it from a good place, I think, is my simple and crisp answer to that. Just do it. If you want to help from a good place. Don't help from a point of despise or despair.
And Moses, as we reach the closing of this interview, for those listeners who are looking to get involved in Black in AI and in the academic program, what are the specific next steps that they should be taking right now?
Yeah. So for the Black in AI, if you go to Facebook, Black in AI, we have a page or a group on there. You can join the group. From there, you should be able to go to our website where you can formally. It's a membership Google form that you fill in, and once you're approved, you join the group where we are then able to share resources, various resources, and it's within that group that we send out. Depending on the year, we usually send out in October, September. We send out emails for people who are interested in applying to grad school. It is a group that. So right now we have about 2,500 members, and this group is both allies and members. You don't have to be Black to join it. You can be an ally. We so far have about 1,850 Black members, and so it's a growing group that is growing, and within it we're able to form community, we're able to form a support resource, we're able to do other things like collaborate with each other and also support people who want to go to conferences like NeurIPS and the like.
Awesome. And also for those who are maybe looking to get in contact with you specifically or take a look at your research a little bit more in depth, where's the best place for them to go?
I have a website. If you type in Google my name, it should be the first one that pops up. But I'm on Twitter as NAMZO 098, Namzo 098. I'm on Facebook on my name is Moses Namara. My email is mosesn@clemson.edu. I'm always happy to respond to emails that are seeking for guidance.
Right, and we'll make sure to link those in the show notes as well. Moses, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you for having me, Jess and Dylan.
A huge thank you to Moses for joining us today and for all of the work that he and Black in AI are doing to support junior scholars and junior researchers. For our outro today, we really just want to highlight how awesome this program is that they have. And so if you are in the Black in AI community, and especially if you're a junior researcher or a junior scholar or just looking for some mentorship, please reach out to Moses or follow the links that we've put in the show notes.
For more information on today's show, please visit the episode page at radicalai.org.
As always, if you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. Catch our new episodes every week on Wednesdays. Join our conversation on Twitter at RadicalAIPod. And as always, stay radical.